Scariest things people have seen while walking at night. Story 1. Oh man, I'm gonna get shit for this one, but here goes. A shadow thing we just referred to as the 8 feet tall guy. Gonna keep this short. It was around New Year's in 2000 and I was 18. Had 6 friends over to hang out since parents were gonna be out really late. I lived in the middle of the woods out in the country, in the Midwest. There is a big machine shed about 200 yards away from the house, lit up by a stadium light. There is another in front of the house, so the surrounding yards were dimly lit. We had left a bunch of liquor up at the bar in the shed, and 3 of us started walking up there while the others were in the house. When we were about 50 feet away, we saw this person-like figure bolt out of the shed. The main door is always open, and run into the trees. And I mean fast. It was maybe 10 feet from that height, yet somehow none of us could see anything but its shape. We naturally thought some dipshits were robbing my shed, and we were a bit spooked. But being young redneck boys with an overdeveloped sense of cowboyism, I told one friend to run back to get the others and my gun. Me and the other friend waited under the light. My friend and I saw the figure right away. That whole timber to the west there is very low weed cover, and the trees are spread evenly apart, which made it easy to watch it. As we strained to keep an eye on it through the dimly lit trees, it started moving around, slowly. We watched as it stepped behind a tree and just vanished. The tree wasn't thick, maybe 9 inches in diameter, but the figure stepped behind it on one side and simply didn't appear on the opposite side. Now, my friend and I's adrenaline spiked as we whisper hurriedly things like WTF and did you see that? As we were quizzing each other and panning around to find it. The rest of the group came running up. One friend had the smarts to hop in his car and drive up so his headlights could light up the whole scene. My friend handed me my .22 rifle and apparently decided to bring all the rest of my guns. 2 pistols and a shotgun. So now a fairly armed group. We were hicks, but we were nerdy hicks, so I'm sure we looked quite the sight. We all see the thing as it casually, yet purposely steps out from behind a different tree than before. Now everyone is at the edge of every signal, and my brain scream, alarm, something nuts right, alarm. We all sensed it and saw what we each saw, but no one spoke at that time. We were too fixated and shocked at what we were seeing. Later in the night, as we all sat around sharing our perception of what happened, we all said the same things we couldn't comprehend at the time. When it stepped out, it didn't cast a shadow. The headlights in the fixed lamp were casting plenty of light into the trees now, and the tree shadows and our shadows were there, but not this thing. Its head was narrower and longer than normal. Its arms, too. And it was tall, hence the 8-foot-tall guy moniker. It moved briskly to another tree and disappeared like before. A few moments later, it walked out from behind a different tree, 10 feet away in the opposite direction. It was like it teleported. It then repeated the scheme several more times. All this allowed us to get plenty of eyes on it, but not me or anyone else could describe it. It's like the lights lit up everything around it, but not the thing itself. Except the eyes. We all agreed it had silver eyes, but the crazy part? We all only saw the eyes out of our peripheral. They just weren't there if you looked at it dead on. After several minutes of this, I finally raised my rifle and tried to sound tough. This is private property, and we are armed. Come towards us slowly and show yourself or I will shoot. That thing stopped dead in its tracks, turned to face me, and studied us for a moment. And then with purpose, it extended a leg and stepped behind a tree that couldn't have been 4 inches wide and vanished. Several minutes go by, and nothing. We eventually decide to huddle up and go back to the house. The buddy in the car drives down ahead. We made it maybe 20 feet when a friend's girlfriend started screaming. The thing was following us about 50 feet south of us, hugging the tree line. It moved wrong, like it was moving its body from a pouncing, slightly crouched over posture to a sprint posture, all while jogging slowly. It literally made your brain hit the brakes as it tried to make sense of the visual input. There's a great book by Stephen King called From a Buick 8, where these cops come across this humanoid creature from another dimension that's so incredibly different from us that their brains can't handle it. And they are overcome with fear so terribly that they beat the creature to death in a fit of insanity and fear and rage. Every time I think back to that deep, instinctual fear that we felt that night, and every time I say the way it moved or looked or behaved was just wrong, I think of that scene in that book. Collectively, everyone that had a gun opened fire without a word. It was as if we all had the same instinctual response. Now, I can't speak for my friends, but I am and have always been backshot with a rifle. I was just raised hunting since I could walk, so I was shocked when I watched leaves blow apart and branches snap and dirt kicked up as the collective firing of birdshot, 22, 38, and 44 ammo blow everything apart around that thing. But that thing itself never seemed to be hit. I'm gonna sum up the rest as it went by in a blur. We all ran for the house when the ammo dried up. Some were already inside, including the dogs, who were terrified of the thing. Or maybe they were scared of us. Who knows? We huddled in the living room and waited. Soon we heard footsteps clattering across the porch. And I mean clatter, is in the thing at nails of some sort. But let me tell you, those sounds are strange and unique too. Next we heard it seemingly climbing up the side of the house behind us, across the roof, and then a thud as it jumped 3 stories down to the ground. Then rinse and repeat on every side of the house, sometimes repeatedly and sometimes with minutes of pauses between. Eventually, we escorted each other to the bathroom, and I and a friend saw it through the sliding glass deck door as it launched itself over the deck railing, a 15-foot drop there as we walked back from the bathroom. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the thing seemed to stop. Not long after, my parents' car turned into our driveway. We all agreed to hightail it to my room because no way we're trying to explain all the guns out and what happened all night. As soon as we got to my room, someone did mention, shouldn't we warn them? We all had the feeling they would be okay, so we didn't. But looking back, telling this as an adult now, good God, yes, we should have warned them. I had a large 2-room basement bedroom. It sounds fancier than it was, trust me. So we just got comfortable and turned my TV on. My parents came inside, and eventually my mom poked her head in to say goodnight. None the wiser due all that we've been through. We all tried to sleep soon after that, and we all slept like hell. But it didn't bother us anymore that night. Throughout the rest of that year, there were several more credible sightings from everyone in the group. Even a couple more people got pulled into the story, as they were with us when we see it again. I think about 11 people overall got to clearly see it that year. Nothing to write about because, well, how do I explain this? Have you ever noticed that when people want to ignore something, even something dangerous, they pretend it isn't happening? Like, okay, yes, we see this thing, but there's nothing we can do about it or get closure on anything about it. So what can you do? You just go about your life. And if you happen to see it running towards you and your friend as you walk to the car at night, you both just hurry up. Get in, lock the doors and speed off, and go in with your night. Rinse and repeat throughout the year. P.S. Yes, over the years I've tried to find info. The closest thing I've found is Native American and First Nations lore about shadow spirits and shadow people, but they didn't seem to fit just right. And yes, I'm a very skeptical person. I am very married to science and common sense. But that thing, well, my brain just goes, I got nothing. You're on your own, buddy. Maybe it was interdimensional, or an alien, or a demon, or some spirit. Except none of those answers feel right, and most sound crazy as shit to me, so I don't know. Even 20 years later, I still struggle with impulsively trying to downplay any of it, because I can't explain it rationally. P.P.S. Yes, I still go into wooded areas at night and other places. I never fear anything happening. I love camping. However, I inherited that same homestead a few years back, and I notice I'm uneasy as hell being outside at night here. I run a small farm here though, so I have to be out after dark. I haven't seen anything yet, and I hope I don't. Normally, you know when it's around. Your anxiety goes from 0 to redline the moment you step into the dark, and that's how you know it's coming. That hasn't happened yet, but the past few weeks something has been feeling a bit off. I don't carry a gun with me usually. I've convinced myself over the years that it's definitely benign. So if I see it, I'm just gonna do my best to either ignore it or converse with it. God help me. Wow, that's a really intense and scary experience. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. It's really understandable that you and your friends were so terrified, and that it had a lasting impact on you. The fact that so many of you saw it multiple times throughout the year must have been incredibly unsettling. It's also frustrating that there doesn't seem to be any explanation or closure for what you did experience. It's hard to imagine how to deal with something like that, especially when it seems like no one else can see or understand what you're going through. It's a good thing that you and your friends had each other to rely on during that time. I know if it happened to me and my friends, we probably would have just ended up peeing ourselves or screaming and running away. Story 2. This just happened the other night. I went to my mom's and my brother, and I went out to take bug pictures and stuff around sunset. Instead of walking from my mom's, we took my car to the other side of the neighborhood and parked in an elementary school parking lot that is right next to a historical house and barn that sits on top of a hill and leads to a big field. We were out for a while and decided to head back to the car around 11 p.m. And when we got near the parking lot, we noticed a car parked literally right next to the passenger side of my car in an otherwise large, empty parking lot with its lights on. I got a weird feeling about it. Plus, I had a backpack full of camera gear, so we walked past in a circle back around hoping that they'd be gone by the time we got back. We finally got back around 15 to 20 minutes later, but cut up the hill behind the house and barn just to stay out of sight, and they were still there with lights on. So we just hung out behind the barn where we could see a reflection of their lights on the side of a trailer and smoke a cigarette, waiting to see what the fuck this person was doing. I just didn't feel right about it because by then it had been sitting there for at least 30 minutes. And of course, we're going through all the reasons why someone would park right next to the only car in a big, empty parking lot at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night. And none of them are good. Finally, after about 40 minutes, we end up calling my mom and having her pick us up down the street so she could pull up on the other side of my car, so I could just get out really quick, hop in my car, and get the fuck out. The car was still there by that time, but only the front lights were on, and the car has the darkest effing tint ever. None of us could see inside. I don't know, it was just weird, and maybe I was being really paranoid, but it weirded us both out, because the only reasons I could think of were they were waiting to jump whoever came to the car, and we had all my camera gear. They were waiting for a drug dealer. They were doing drugs. It was teenagers parking to have sex, do drugs, it was a cop, etc. Thankfully, my mom also thought it was weird and barely waited for me to finish telling her what was going on before she said that she'd be right there. That sounds like a really creepy and unnerving experience. I don't blame you for feeling paranoid and uneasy about the situation. It's always better to err on the side of caution in situations like this, especially when you have expensive camera gear or stuff with you. It's hard to know what the people in the other car were up to, but it's definitely strange that they would park right next to your car, an otherwise empty parking lot for such a long time. It was really nice that your mom came to help though. Moms for the win, honestly. Story 3. There was a park somewhat deep in a heavily wooded forest up in the Sierra Nevada mountains where I grew up. This is on the outskirts of a small town of 5,000 people. The park was crazy dark at night because the trees blocked the night sky completely, and there were 0 electric lights in the park. I took a girl there one night to go swing on these massive swings at the far side of the park. We parked a car at the long perimeter fence at the one opening in the chain to get in. We felt our way past the trees and stumbled on the uneven grass. There were lots of old-growth roots to trip on, and it was pretty hilarious to try and find the swings with our single, tiny flip phone light. We finally found them and had been swinging as high as we could and laughing in the dark when all of a sudden, we heard the voice of a man in the distance behind us, deep in the brush. He was yelling something. We immediately went silent, still swinging fast back and forth, too high to jump, and too startled to try and kick the ground to make too much noise and draw attention. The sound of the man thrashing toward us in the brush, any distance, got closer and closer. In just a few moments, when we finally realized what he was saying, "I'll effing kill you." You know when someone says something and you know that they mean it? Like on an instinctive level. We both knew he meant it. So without saying anything, we both bailed out of the swings in the dark, hit the ground hard and knocked the wind out of us. We grabbed hands and ran in the dark in a random direction, tripping, hitting trees, etc. All the while the man was still violently yelling and coming our way, behind us in the dark. Before we knew it, we ran face first into the chain fence at the edge of the park and began to quickly feel along it to the right for a time until we found the opening in the fence. Jumping in the car, turning the key. The headlights flipped on automatically just in time to reveal a furious, wild-eyed man running full speed through the fence and literally slamming his hands on the hood of the car, screaming. Already in reverse, we hit the gas and sped backward up the country road, leaving the man standing there, losing his mind. It's a good thing you and the girl you were with were able to get away safely. It's really unsettling to think about how quickly a peaceful and quiet evening can turn into a life-threatening situation. It's hard to imagine what that man's intentions were, but it's clear that he was extremely dangerous and that you made the right choice to run away and get away from him as quickly as possible. Here's my advice. Maybe next time for a first date, just go to the movies. Story 4. One day, I thought it would be good to try a morning run. Now, usually I have to be in the shower at 6:30 and ready to leave home at 7 to catch my morning train. I decided I would leave at 5:30, so I set my Animal Lodge alarm, yes, I'm old, to 5:30 a.m. the next day. Due to daylight savings, I actually set it back to 4:30. So I'm on my morning jog, and I mainly jog through bushland, but at the end of my jog, I have to go through this main town area. I briefly remember someone in the alleyway rushing out at me with a knife, screaming something. I couldn't make out, then just sprinting as fast as I could. I got away with no injuries, but just a big scare. Anyway, I'm sticking to afternoon jogs now. I was taking a walk at night, but rather closing the store in a mall at night. I was 16, closed up shop, and started to leave. Lights were turning off overhead, and anyone milling around was excited. I make eye contact with the dude and walk past him. Walked only for 10 more seconds before my inner alarm bells went off. I looked behind me, and he's roughly 10 feet away, getting closer. I ducked into the closest store, still open, and as I did, I felt a whoosh of air right next to me as though he tried to reach out and grab me. I'm in the store, and I see him standing out there, waiting for me to leave. Thankfully, the sales lady asked if I'm okay, and I told her that a creeper was following me. She got security to escort me to my car. As soon as the asshole saw a big old security man, he bounced. Effing creeper still gives me chills thinking about what could have happened. I am so happy you're okay. I've been followed too by a creepy guy, and just shout out to that sales lady. She handled it really well. Story 5. Helped a couple who claimed the woman got robbed on New Year's Eve. She appeared drunk and very nervous. I called the cops who told me they were too busy and that the couple should come to the police station the day after. So I offered to walk with them and help the woman to walk. With her arms around my neck and her, I assumed, boyfriend, we head off to the inner city where it's not well lit up and a lot of dark alleys. In France, by the way, if that matters. The dude kept checking his phone. The woman was more nervous by the minute. At some point, the guy stops and goes away for a phone call near a dark alley, 20 meters away. Then the girl snaps, grabs my arm, and looks at me in the eyes with no drunk signs anymore and tells me, "Go. Don't question it. Just go. And don't look back. Go where there's light and people. We shouldn't do this." I was shocked, so I left, and the dude asked me why I was leaving. So I said I had to hurry home. He started coming to me quickly. The woman just grabbed his arm and just screamed at me, "Please, please go away quickly." It's fortunate that the woman was able to snap out of her drunken state and warn you to leave. It's unfortunate the police were not able to assist in the moment, but it's good that you were able to offer some support to this couple, even if it ultimately led to a dangerous situation. It's important to remember to prioritize your own safety and well-being in these kinds of situations. But if you want my opinion, I think something sketchier was up. Story 6. Back in high school, my buddy and I were walking to another friend's house around midnight. We lived in this tiny-ass town, and to get to my friend's house, we had to walk across a massive field with short grass, about 2 football fields in length. The far end of the field is backlit by a street. As we are just entering the field, we see the shadow of a human figure stand up at the far end of the field. We just think that it's our friend coming out to meet us, until we see the shadow turn and look directly at us. It then just drops and starts sprinting on all fours directly at us. I mean, faster than I've ever seen. I'm shitting myself thinking, I must be going crazy and I'm seeing things. But my buddy grabs my arm and points me, telling me to run the F away. We both sprint out of the field and across the street as far and as fast as we can possibly go. To this day, I have no idea what was chasing us, or if I really saw it. But my buddy remembers the exact same details, the exact same way. Don't think I can go into fields at night, ever again. Story 7. It was more what I didn't see. We were in Montana, just north of Yellowstone, staying in a cabin in the middle of nowhere on a former ranch. We misjudged our hike and ended up coming back right at like dusk and dark. We were a little nervous, but to reassure each other, I reminded myself and my husband that as long as we saw the usual 5,000 deer on the way to our cabin, we were probably okay. Every night there were tons of deer everywhere on the ranch who really weren't scared of us at all, since the owners didn't allow hunting. But that night, there was not a single effing deer. We didn't hear or see any animals at all, when every other night, we'd see at least 4 or 5 deer, possums, and a very cute skunk just from our porch. It was effing nerve-wracking as hell, but we just kept our bear spray ready, talked loudly, and walked at a steady pace. The owners called us the next day to warn us to be careful after dark, because a cougar had been spotted at a neighboring farm. We made sure to get back before dark for the rest of our trip. The fact that there were no deer around when you usually saw so many must have been really unnerving. It's good that you and your husband were prepared with bear spray and were cautious when walking back to your cabin. The warning about the cougar sighting at the neighboring farm is definitely something to take seriously. I'm glad you made it back safely and were able to enjoy the rest of your trip without incident, but I'm not sure if bear spray could work on a cougar. I don't know. If anybody knows, please tell me. Story 8. Walking the dog at night when I got home, 2 shifty dudes were waiting outside my house. They asked if Haley was inside. I said there's no Haley in my home. They pushed for more, giving me a description of this Haley. I said no again, and offered to ask local police or something since they weren't from the area. They left, but not really. They waited in a car that didn't belong on my street. Haley was my next-door neighbor's daughter, so I was pretty pissed off that my address was used for some reason, but I wasn't going to tell two random assholes where she lived either. I looked outside the window from upstairs in the dark. They were parked outside. Left after maybe 15 minutes. I was ready to call the police if they hung about longer. I called Haley's dad about it since he was on a taxi shift. He didn't know them. Next day, both Haley and he can't wait to ask about it. Haley feigned ignorance, claiming she didn't know them either. The matter didn't go far as that, but I was mildly on alert for a couple weeks since then. This happened before COVID lockdown. Story 9. I was smoking some weed, so I had a good high going at that point. My sister's little dog comes up to me, sits down, and begins to stare at me to go outside. I knew no one else was going to take him out and would still get mad at him if he had an accident. It's between 1 and 2 a.m. when I step outside. I take a few steps and the neighbor asks if he can pet the dog. I said yeah, but because I was high, I tried to keep walking. He asked me to stop, so I do when he's petting the dog. I begin to hear these pops, whistles, and buzzes. I swear I could have felt the air pressure around the bullets as they buzzed by. I thought I was hearing bottle rackets, so I thought, the 4th is over, why the F are they still playing with this shit? Then my neighbor tells me, we're being shot at. And I ask, are you sure? Then he tells me, I've been to Iraq. I know when I'm being shot at. Well, this is quite the story. I don't know if it's the weed or the bullets that have me feeling a bit high right now. I mean, who expects to be shot at while taking their sister's dog for a late night walk? And to have a neighbor who can confirm that, yep, those are definitely bullets flying by? Well, that's just the cherry on top. OP, do you know why you're being shot at? Maybe it's because they wanted to pet your dog too. Story 10. I used to jog after work. Due to my schedule, on occasion it meant I was jogging at night. I run in my neighborhood and come across a corner yard with the hedges all the way around it. I had an earbud in and was just kind of vibing. I noticed a woman walking her large dog towards me on the sidewalk, so I turned down a driveway to head out to the side of the street. Just as I hit the driveway, a rabbit got spooked and shot out of the hedges within a foot of me. In order to assert dominance over the rabbit, I scampered and let out a very high-pitched yet manly scream. I could tell the woman walking the dog was incredibly impressed with my prowess by the way she was laughing. As I jogged past her, I said, "You see that? Things were coming right for me," and kept on my way. Most of the time, though, it's dogs and fence yards catching me off guard. Or drunk people. Story 11. I live way out in the country, so when I go for walks, I just go out in the woods. One night, probably like 2 a.m., I went for a walk because I couldn't sleep. Got about a mile into the woods and found like an effing worshipping shrine or some shit. There was blood onto the wood table, probably a rabbit or some small animal, because there were some small skulls. It's a little weird to find something that far out in the woods because neighbors here are miles away. Not gonna lie, kind of freaked me out. Plus, not caring that night. Wasn't planning on walking that far. I just turned around and walked back. Woke up later that day and went back. Nothing was there except for like an indentation in the grass. When I saw that everything was gone, really made me think that I wasn't alone that night. Okay, so let me get this straight here, just for my own sake. You're just out for a casual midnight stroll in the woods and suddenly stumble upon a freaky shrine, complete with blood and tiny animal skulls. And to top it all off, you weren't even packing any heat. Dude, what are you thinking? Run. Just run. But seriously, that's some spooky stuff. It's one thing to find like a random pile of rocks in the wood, but a bloody altar is just a whole other level of creepy. But hey, at least you got a good story out of it. I mean, just imagine telling your grandkids about the time you stumbled upon a sacrificial altar in the middle of the woods. That's gotta be some major respect for Grandpa. Story 12. In New Orleans, the first week of Mardi Gras, we passed a bar in which a fight had apparently just occurred. One dude comes out of the bar, face bloody, and I've never seen that look in another person's eyes. He was so crazy. He was all animal, like no human. He started swinging at people on the street right in front of me and my buddy who didn't see him. I pull my mate back before he gets it, and this guy goes bananas in the street. The cops were nearby, so they grabbed him, walked into the police car. He wouldn't go in the car door to get inside of the patrol car. So one cop takes the guy by the back of the head, slams his face into the trunk, knocks the guy out, and they stuff him into the patrol car and dive off. Lasted 20 seconds tops. Seems like a long time. Story 13. I once was 7,000 miles away from home in a motel in the middle of nowhere, Poland to be precise, and decided to buy some snacks before going to bed. Started walking down the road and every store I've seen earlier the day was closed. Kept walking until I realized I was absolutely alone at 2 a.m. in a place I didn't know. Not a single noise on a dark road next to a forest. I freaked out and turned back to the hotel, but I was far away. Started running, completely scared, and finally arrived at the hotel, sweating and agitated. Didn't know how to explain that nothing happened to me, but I was terrified.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.